This is the nuclear-powered aircraft carrier Charles de Gaulle. It is France's first mobile aircraft carrier, and also its only current aircraft carrier. As a medium-sized aircraft carrier, the Charles de Gaulle is 261 meters long and 64 meters wide. Looking only at Europe, the Charles de Gaulle is not considered a large aircraft carrier. This allows it to carry fixed-wing, early warning aircraft, while aircraft carriers using ski jump decks can only use helicopter early warning, and the early warning range is much smaller. In terms of carrier-based aircraft configuration, the Charles de Gaulle can carry more than 40 aircraft at most. Although the fleet size is not large, the overall combat capability is still very good, especially the Rafale. Its comprehensive performance is even better than the U.S. military's F-18 Super Hornet, as most NATO countries embrace the U.S. and use American equipment. France is the most independent country in terms of military industry and national defense, with the least dependence on the United States. 891. Whether it is an aircraft carrier or carrier-based aircraft, they're all purely French-made. It can still maintain complete independent research and development in key technology fields. It can be said that the Charles de Gaulle is a unique existence in Europe. Welcome to Chris Military Base, focusing on the appreciation of military equipment from various countries. The importance of aircraft carriers to the Navy. To build a strong maritime force, aircraft carriers are indispensable. As a major European power, France has an aircraft carrier fleet, which is also a display of its military strength and an important means of deterrence. For this reason, France soon began to build their first aircraft carrier after World War II, the Clemenceau class. The first Clemenceau class started construction in 1955, launched in 1957, and commissioned in 1961. After commissioning, it immediately became the flagship of the French Navy, active in the Mediterranean region. The Clemenceau class can be described as small but complete. It uses a traditional deck layout, a combination of steam catapults and arresting gear recovery. This makes its overall combat capability like the U.S. military's Kitty Hawk class aircraft carriers of the same period. The Kitty Hawk class has a full load displacement of 82,000 tons. This is a quite impressive number. Having tasted the sweetness, the French started planning the next generation of aircraft carriers. In the late 1970s, the plan went through many modifications and finally established that the overall design follows the Clemenceau class, but the size is increased and the power system is upgraded. The first aircraft carrier, Charles de Gaulle, began construction in 1987, but there were constant problems in the middle. The government stopped funding many times. This led to the Charles de Gaulle not officially entering service until 2001. It took 14 years. The hull was already showing signs of aging when it entered service. Pipes corroded. Cracks appeared in the hull. This undoubtedly greatly increased its subsequent operating costs. The hull construction cost $22 billion. The USS Reagan cost $44 billion, equivalent to twice the amount of the USS Reagan. The original plan was to build 2 aircraft carriers of this class. However, due to various delays and cost overruns, the French Parliament voted against this plan in 2005. Among them, the most famous incident occurred in 2000, November 2000, when the Charles de Gaulle was on sea trials in the Atlantic. One of the aircraft carrier's propellers disintegrated. Part of the blade broke off and sank to the bottom of the sea. This forced the Charles de Gaulle to return to its home port in a hurry, to replace and overhaul the propulsion system. But who knew that the 2 brand new spare propellers also had quality problems? The alloy in the middle of the propeller was substandard due to the manufacturing process. There were a lot of bubbles and cracks. This greatly affected the strength of the propeller. The incident escalated quickly. The French government began to investigate the responsible party. It was finally discovered that the propeller supplier was Alstom Marine, to be held responsible for this issue. They even knew before the incident that there were manufacturing defects in the propellers of the Charles de Gaulle. The quality was not up to standard, but it was still installed in the end. While this investigation was underway, a mysterious fire destroyed the company's engineering and design department's documents, hindering further investigation. Speaking of the Charles de Gaulle, because there were also problems with the spare propellers, and manufacturing new ones would take too long, the French had to use the propellers from the already retired Clemenceau aircraft carrier to solve the immediate problem. The problem was that the old propellers would cause severe vibrations when the aircraft carrier was traveling at high speed. Therefore, the top speed of the Charles de Gaulle was limited to about 25 knots, 463 km/h. Until 2008, Marine installed completely new American-made propellers, bringing the top speed to 27 knots, 50 km/h. But even at this speed, it could be said to be the slowest level among aircraft carriers. The main reason is still due to the nuclear-powered propulsion system on the aircraft carrier. The Charles de Gaulle is currently the only nuclear-powered aircraft carrier besides the United States. This gives it impressive endurance and excellent acceleration. The Charles de Gaulle can accelerate to 20 knots in 4 minutes, reaching a top speed of 27 knots in 7 minutes. In contrast, previous traditional powered aircraft carriers may take more than 10 minutes to reach their maximum speed. Secondly, nuclear reactors take up relatively little space. They also don't need chimneys or designated fuel depots, which can improve the space utilization of the aircraft carrier. The 2 nuclear reactors on the Charles de Gaulle also bring some problems. First of all, the reactor was designed to save money. It was not a reactor specifically built for aircraft carriers. Instead, the existing K-15 nuclear reactor from their own Triomphant-class nuclear submarine was used. But for aircraft carriers, the performance of the K-15 reactor is still slightly lower. It has to be pressurized and upgraded. In this process, the French spent even more money, but the final result was not satisfactory. The power of the nuclear reactor is about 150 megawatts. This makes its top speed only 27 knots. This is under windless conditions, the minimum speed to safely catapult a fully loaded Rafale fighter. Even the retired Clemenceau class of their own is 5 knots faster than the Charles de Gaulle. The second is the service life of the reactor. The U.S. Nimitz-class aircraft carrier needs to replenish fuel every 25 years. The Charles de Gaulle needs it every 7 years or so. In order to facilitate the access of the nuclear reactor during maintenance, the island is also placed further forward. This is also on the Charles de Gaulle, another unique feature. The vast majority of modern aircraft carriers' islands are located in the mid-rear of the deck. This design leaves more space on the flight deck to provide more space for carrier-based aircraft. It also makes it easier to dispatch and direct aircraft on the deck. The center of gravity is towards the rear, which can also improve the stability of the aircraft carrier during navigation. But the Charles de Gaulle is different from them all. The island is positioned at the front of the deck. There are 2 main reasons for this. The first is for maintenance, to facilitate the access of the nuclear reactor. The second is due to the limited size of the aircraft carrier. If the island is placed in the rear, it will encroach on the angled deck space, affecting the landing of carrier-based aircraft. Placing it in the middle would divide the deck space. It can only be placed in the front, with the 2 elevators and the fighter preparation area at the rear. This is the optimal solution to improve the efficiency of deck aircraft operations. The maximum sortie rate reaches 25 sorties every 4 hours. In addition, the forward island also gives the carrier-based aircraft excellent landing visibility. The space on both sides is very spacious. It is not inferior to the Ford class in terms of landing visibility, but the disadvantages are also obvious. Because the island is too far forward, the catapult on the front deck can only be located on the left side. This causes the 2 catapults on the aircraft carrier to have overlapping areas with the landing deck. So the Charles de Gaulle cannot perform catapult and recovery operations simultaneously. Besides this, the island being too far forward affects the stability of the aircraft carrier during navigation. For this reason, the Charles de Gaulle has an independent balancing system. There are 2 rows of tracks under the flight deck, filled with 7 ballast blocks. The principle is like a seesaw. When the hull tilts to one side, the ballast blocks will move to the other side to stabilize the hull. When the Charles de Gaulle turns at a 30-degree angle at a speed of 20 knots, the hull only tilts by 1 degree, comparable to the 100,000 ton Nimitz class. The AVRB-2. The AVRBZ, the hangar of the Charles de Gaulle. The AVRB-2 can hold up to 25 aircraft. The maintenance of the carrier-based aircraft is done here. They usually work at night. To keep the aircraft in top condition, there are even 2 engine test stands here. During routine maintenance, they will remove the aircraft engine and install it on the test stand to test its best performance. Maintenance is quite important. This can greatly improve the availability of the fighter. The highest readiness rate reaches 794. That is if the aircraft carrier is fully loaded with 3 squadrons of Rafale fighters. 34 out of 36 aircraft can take off at any time. The highest readiness rate of the F-18 on the Nimitz class is only about 80. In terms of catapults, the Charles de Gaulle uses the same C-13 as the Nimitz class. Steam catapult, but limited by the deck length. The catapult on the Charles de Gaulle is only 75 meters long, slightly shorter than the Nimitz class 95 meters. The catapult can within 2 seconds launch a 25-ton aircraft at a speed of 1,270 kilometers per hour. But because the stroke of the catapult is shorter, the process of accelerating the aircraft is also faster. When the Nimitz class catapults, pilots usually experience 34 gs of acceleration. But on the Charles de Gaulle, it is 45 gs. The pushing back is stronger. When the 2 catapults are used alternately, 1 aircraft can be launched every 30 seconds. The recovery device uses 3 sets of arresting cables, which can stop an aircraft at 275 kilometers per hour, within a distance of about 75 meters. The landing process looks quite extreme. It is less than 10 meters away from the edge of the deck. Thanks to its combination of catapults and arresting gear, the Charles de Gaulle is currently the only aircraft carrier that can operate all aircraft of the U.S. Navy, including C-2 Greyhounds, E-2 Hawkeyes, F-18 Super Hornets, etc. Similarly, all aircraft of the French Navy can also operate on U.S. military aircraft carriers. In 2017, the Charles de Gaulle aircraft carrier entered its midlife refit, lasting about 2 years. France did not have any aircraft carriers available. However, what they were most worried about was not the aircraft carrier, but the professional level of their carrier air wing. After all, 2 years without practicing flying on an aircraft carrier is a very long time, and the professional level of personnel may decline significantly. Fortunately, the Americans extended an olive branch. They invited the Charles de Gaulle's Air Squadron to train on a U.S. military aircraft carrier. The French, of course, gladly accepted. Therefore, in 2018, the French Navy sent 13 aircraft and 350 personnel to Virginia to train with the U.S. military. This was the first time that foreign aircraft trained on a U.S. military aircraft carrier. F-18s and Rafales fought side by side. This was a good opportunity to learn from the world's strongest navy. During this time, National French consolidate, Marine National E and enhance their experience in using carrier-based aircraft. Finally, Marin, the endurance of all nuclear-powered vessels, is closely related to the amount of supplies they can carry. The Charles de Gaulle can carry up to 315 tons of food, 600 tons of ammunition, and 3,400 tons of aviation fuel. This allows it to operate independently for about 45 days. But the fuel reserves only allow the carrier-based aircraft to perform 700 sorties. If calculated according to the Charles de Gaulle's highest sortie rate, which is 80 sorties per day, it will run out of fuel in just over a week. So, usually, aircraft carriers have supply ships accompanying them. In high-intensity sortie situations, there will be 2 accompanying them to ensure that the fuel level on the aircraft carrier does not fall below 70. As a typical medium-sized aircraft carrier, the Charles de Gaulle has about 2,000 personnel on board when fully loaded, including 1,400 crew members and 600 carrier air wing personnel. Life on an aircraft carrier is quite rich and colorful. First, food. There are more than 40 chefs on the Charles de Gaulle, working from 5 a.m. to 8 p.m. every day, providing the crew with a variety of rich meals. All the menus are the same, from the captain to the sailors. Each department has its own independent dining area. It can be seen that they are quite satisfied with the food. We eat very well. National, very good. Lots of vegetables. Look how clean he ate. The plate is empty. It is worth mentioning that on the Charles de Gaulle, baguettes are the most popular food. There is even a special room for making baguettes. More than 1,800 fresh baguettes are produced every day to supply the crew. For the French, this position is sacred. Working here is an honor. Making bread is a traditional custom of the French people. It is an honor to be able to make French bread on a French aircraft carrier. In addition to work, there are also some relaxing and leisure places on the aircraft carrier. You can find a few friends to play table football or play 2 rounds of FIFA. There's also a small internet cafe. World of Warcraft, Cisco, and Call of Duty are all available. It is definitely a good place to relieve stress. Barbershops, stores, hospitals, and gyms are also standard. However, the gym is relatively crowded. So on the Charles de Gaulle, crew members are often organized to do exercises on the deck, run, etc., to maintain good physical condition. There's even a bar on the aircraft carrier. The lighting here is dim, and the atmosphere is nice. Everyone can have a drink and chat here, but don't drink too much. And don't fall for the female crew member next to you. On the Charles de Gaulle, any ambiguous relationships are strictly prohibited. As for the accommodation conditions, ordinary crew members usually share a room with 9 people, but there are only 3-layer bunks. For tall people, the space is still very cramped. The female soldiers' dormitory has the same configuration, but the officers have much better accommodation conditions. They have a small room of 10 square meters, which can fit a small bed and a desk. The space is much more abundant. As the flagship of the French Navy, the Charles de Gaulle has a wealth of combat experience. It was deployed in the Arabian Sea in 2001, 2002, 2004, 2006, 2007, and 2010 to carry out operations against Afghanistan. In 2010, it set out for Libya. In 2015 and 2016, it set out for Syria to combat ISIS. As of 2017, the Charles de Gaulle had already flown more than 40,000 sorties. The most recent deployment occurred on April 11, 2024. France handed over control, and the Charles de Gaulle was for the first time under NATO command, performing missions. It can be said that except for the U.S. aircraft carriers, the Charles de Gaulle has the most combat experience. It has also been the well-deserved French top card in recent decades. Europe's number 1. December 2020. French President Macron announced that the Charles de Gaulle will retire in 2038. At that time, it will be replaced by the brand new aircraft carrier Pang. The new aircraft carrier will have a displacement of more than 75,000 tons, equipped with a more advanced nuclear reactor, electromagnetic catapults, and arresting systems. It will become the first super aircraft carrier in French service. Okay, that's all for this episode of One Pin. If you think it's not bad, don't forget to like, comment, and share. If likes exceed 20,000, in the next episode of One Pin, we'll return to the air and talk about a relatively unpopular fighter jet, the F-111. Okay, see you in the next video.